All right, so as I said before, my name is Matthew Kaler. I'm with Knowledge Lake as one of the systems engineers. And what I'm going to do today is basically, I'm just going to walk you guys through a very quick presentation on how we can go through the solution within the Knowledge Lake Advanced Capture solution. So to do that, I'm going to kind of use this slide to help me go through the process. Let me go and blow this up so we can see this. So you notice we have two parts here. We have the client processes and we have the automated processes. So as we go through, I'm going to highlight what, from your perspective, what you guys will be doing and interacting throughout this capture process and how we can get it into SharePoint. And then we're also going to show you that I'm also going to speak to the automated process that are happening in the background, so we can kind of see what's happening through the entire process from end to end, as far as like capturing the document and then getting it into SharePoint. So the first step, obviously, we want to capture that document. So we have our Knowledge Lake Capture tool that we're going to use to do that. So let me bounce over here, and we're going to jump into the Knowledge Lake Capture tool. And as we do this, this is going to be presented a little bit differently than what it was initially. Initially, we were to bring in the document, and we were going to index it right here and release it. What we're going to do today is we're going to actually just bring the document in, and we're not going to index it. We're just going to release it so that we can release it to that advanced Knowledge Lake solution. So to do so, we hit that scan button. And if it was attached to a scanner at this point, we would obviously be scanning in a document, but I don't have a scanner attached. And what you guys saw before is I can actually bring in a document that was actually scanned from like a multifunctional device. So I'm just going to do that by clicking here, and you'll see the documents start to populate on the left here. Again, you can see the batches start to break out, right? And to I think it was Sharon's point, you know, you can use those barcode separator sheets to separate things out. In this case, I just have blank page separation. And basically, the point what I'm doing here is basically all I'm doing is capturing the document so that I can bring it in and just kind of look through it, making sure that the documents are proper and that these are the documents that I want to bring through and put through the system. As I go through here on the left panel here, you always have those right-click options to be able to do the window controls such as cut, copy, paste, delete, and so forth. So at this point, since we're just capturing the document, we can review it, everything looks good, and we can release it into the system. Before I do that, I'm just going to do a quick review of the documents I want to put through because I have 8 documents, and what you're going to see is through the process, half of them are going to be put through the system automatically, and 4 are going to be stopped to where we can validate and review them before they move on to the next step. So what I have here is I have a Barnes & Noble document. This is going to be my example of an invoice that's never been bought through my system before. This is going to be something new. I've never done a Barnes & Noble invoice, and you're going to see how we can easily adapt that and train the system to automatically accept that Barnes & Noble invoice and move it along. Document 2 is a basic invoice. Document 2 through 8 are just basic invoices that we scanned through the process before, and they've already got profiles associated to them, and you're going to see how those automatically process. Document 8 is an example of a document that has a ton of line item coding, as well as is a multi-page document. So you're going to see how we can not only pull data from the first page, but we can pull data from the second page as well as grab all those line items that are within this document. All right, so at this point, I haven't really done anything fancy. I've just captured the document, and now I'm going to release it. So upon release, I'm actually sending it into that advanced Knowledge Lake Capture solution. So let me jump back to my PowerPoint presentation here, and let's see the slide to see where we're at. So as this is happening, we've captured that document, right? We've brought in through capture, whether it's been from a multifunctional device or just a hard scan. It's been brought in, and now it's going through an image processing process. So at this point, during this phase of the process, it's being cleaned up. It's being, it's going through the process of despeckling, deskewing. It's lining the pages up properly, making sure that that document is a solid scan and is in its clear, most best form by the time it moves to the next step. Because as the better the image that we have, the better the OCR process will work in the next phase. And that next phase is the interpretation phase. So what this does here is the advanced solution is actually going to go through and read each of these invoices, and it's going to go through and identify specific logos, phone numbers, associating them to a profile to where it can then pull the purchase order, invoice date, and such fields from that document and associate them to those documents. And so here's kind of like an automation of what's happening behind the scenes. So the advanced solution is behind the scenes scanning those documents, and you can see it's going to identify the logo, and then it's going to identify such fields as purchase order, invoice number, invoice date, and so forth, and it's going to automatically identify the line items that are associated to this invoice. So as we move along, again, we've captured it.
Hey, Matt. This is Jason from Knowledge Lake. Can you go back one slide?
Sure.
Sorry, guys. I just wanted to point out one very clear thing here. You know, with a lot of other intelligent document recognitions or advanced OCR solutions that you might have already seen, the Knowledge Lake one has a very specific advantage, and it's that we don't really use templates per se. A template is not applied to a specific invoice of a specific type. It's more based off of a profile. And what that really means is that when you install the software, you don't have to spend, the next 4 weeks scanning all of your invoices and manually going in and defining all of these templates. The software is learning software rather than, you set up all these templates and it just simply applies them and lays them on top. What the software does here, and if you can look at this invoice, it scans the entire invoice and recognizes the logo or the phone number or any combination of that to determine if there's a profile that matches it or not. And then it searches all of the pages for specific terms or words rather than just applying a template. Other software will say, okay, well, we always know that invoice number is at this XY coordinate. And that's fine, but what that means is you have to set up all those templates and define those XY coordinates. The Knowledge Lake software, what it is, it searches all of those pages for terms like invoice number, invoice no, invoice #, INV number. It searches for those terms, and then it looks to the right, the left, above, below to find that value. And what that really means is, and you'll see this later on in Matt's demonstration, is even if we've never seen a document, an invoice before, right? He mentioned that the Barnes & Noble is an invoice that's never been scanned before into this system. It will still attempt to and successfully pull off information from that invoice, even though it's the first time it's ever seen it. And then obviously you can go in and make certain tweaks or modifications to make those profiles act more effectively. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, great. I'm sorry. That's a big distinction between other, intelligent document recognition softwares and the solution that we're sort of showing here today.
All right, great. That was great, Jason. Great explanation there. So as it goes through that process and recognizes it and associates that invoice to a specific profile, it's then going to associate it to the next process is the verification process. Let me find my mouse here and continue with the clicking here. So as we go through again, we've captured, image processed it, interpreted. Now we're into the verification process. So at this point, this is as you notice, we're on the client processing aspect here. So this is where the users will actually come in and do a kind of a verification process. So I'm going to hop over to the verification module so that you can see what I'm talking about. All right, so we've scanned that batch of 8 documents. If you recall, there was 8 of them. 4 of them have been stopped for some reason. So for example, we have this one. This is my Barnes & Noble document. It doesn't know what to do with it. It's not been associated to a profile. You see that the supplier is blank. So it's going to go through and it's going to stop it here. And you also see we have some other invoices that have been stopped here as well. And I'll explain those as we go along. So for the user, we want to come in here. We want to go ahead and select all of them. And we want to move through. We want to manually validate or verify these invoices before we move them on to the next phase. So here's that Barnes & Noble invoice. Before I start jumping into it too much, notice already to the right, we see these fields. We have invoice number, invoice date, total amount, currency, PO, invoice credit. Those are the fields associated to this invoicing solution and profile. And what we can do is it's automatically, like Jason was saying earlier, the software is intelligent enough to automatically go through and identify specific areas of the document, or not areas, but specific characters of this document, recognizing the logo, the telephone number, the invoice number. You can automatically see that. So what we can do now is kind of tailor these results so that next time this document comes through, that we don't have to go through this process again. We can automatically just build out the profile for this Barnes & Noble invoice, so next time it can be automatically processed. So to do this, for the supplier, we'll just call this Barnes & Noble. And then to show you how easy it is just to set the characters in, to automatically populate this, we can go through and check out invoice number. We can highlight it, validate, and make sure that it's pulling the proper location or the proper value for invoice number. Then we have invoice date, and you'll notice that has a question mark, so it basically says, I don't know where to grab it from, so I need to tell it specifically.
Hey, Matt, can I pause you for a second?
Sure.
My laptop screen decided to black out, so we were just looking.
Okay.
Hold on just a sec. Hopefully I can get this back. Members of the AV. Hey Matt, does it still show me as joined into the go-to meeting?
Yeah, let me look real quick. Yeah, I still see you.
Okay. In my computer's infinite wisdom, it's decided to take it out.
That does not reflect on Jason, though.
All right, that's a little sad here, Matt.
Okay, no worries.
Yay!
All right, so you're back?
We are back. Sorry about that.
Okay. No problem. So just to recap kind of where we're at, so basically I've gone through this process, and I'm in the verification process, and it's gone through and identified this invoice as a new invoice. Basically, it didn't know what to do with it. So basically, I selected that invoice, and we're going through and just going through the verification process. And what you see here is it's automatically getting these, pulling the data for these fields just by doing an intelligent scan on this document. With no profile associated to it, it's automatically finding invoice number, purchase order, and so forth. And at this point, all I'm doing is going through and validating it. I'm not sure where you guys dropped off, but I've added the supplier name of Barnes & Noble. So at this point, I can actually build out this profile as I'm validating this invoice. So that way, next time this invoice or a similar invoice of this type from Barnes & Noble comes through, it can automatically go through and identify the specific fields we want to grab. So again, going through, looking at the fields over here, we see a yellow flag against total amount. That's basically saying, hey, I've looked at this document. I think I've grabbed the specific area where this total amount is, but I'm not sure. So what you do as a user, we come in here and we grab that invoice amount or that total amount, click on that amount, and it's going to take me to where it's guessing that it thinks that's the proper value to be populating for this field. Fortunately, it looks like it grabbed it. So, this is where you come in and more or less just validate, and we just hit the enter button, and it's going to say, great, we'll move on to the next one. Now, purchase order number, if you look to the right of it, it finds 3 different locations where it potentially might be the purchase order number. So what it does is it actually highlights those 3 different areas, and as I scroll through the areas, you can kind of see the potential purchase order numbers. And basically, it was right on the first try. So it sees purchase order number, and we can see that this is the number that was grabbed, and this is the number that's actually being populated. So that's right. So without even doing anything, I'm just pretty much just verifying that that's the proper number. And once I hit enter, it kind of puts the green light on everything, and I'm ready to move on to the next document.
So Matt, if I can just jump in again here. So what Matt showed was, we scanned this Barnes & Noble invoice, never been through this system before, and I would say that 80% of the information that we wanted to capture about it was automatically extracted. And really what the user was doing here was just going through and say, yeah, you got everything right. Looking down here at the line items, everything looks good. Now the next time that a Barnes & Noble invoice comes through, the system's got a profile set up for it, so it'll be a lot more optimized. It won't have to guess as much. It'll know who the supplier is. And eventually, once you get the the software from where it's learned the invoice to where you trust it, you can click, whenever you see Barnes & Noble, as long as there's no validation errors, just send them straight through. And so really when we install this software, we install it, we configure it, we turn it on, and really we just, rather than going through and setting up templates, we really just say, start scanning. Just start doing it. And as your users start scanning and start processing these invoices, these profiles and all these optimizations will start to get built, and pretty soon, you'll be working on production data, and your system will just start to tune itself and get better and better and more reliable and more accurate and so on.
All right.
Now, do you have the ability to assign, who this is going to get routed to, or does that happen in the other solution? Yeah.
So at this point, we're just basically getting this document into SharePoint, which is the document management repository there. And then once it gets to that area, once it gets to SharePoint, that's when those workflows start to kick in. So that's where, again, like Jeremy or Ron was talking about earlier, where based on the amount or based on the vendor, based on location or whatever the case may be, that's when it then gets routed to the specific user for the approval process. So at this point, we're just kind of we're in the journey of getting this document into SharePoint. Just basically grabbing that information up front.
You could, some clients completely simplify the workflow process and just kind of bring it through here, get the data, and then have a drop-down field here that says product supply for approval, and just, but most of what I was sure.
Okay. So once we've got that Barnes & Noble in, we've kind of, like Jason mentioned earlier, next time we go through and get the same exact template or invoice coming through, it'll automatically identify these fields for us and make this process a little bit quicker the next time around. So as we click on to the next document, we go to, this is the Silver Shield Security invoice. Notice everything's green. All I have to do is validate, verify, make sure everything's good. If we continue to get this Silver Shield Security document through here, this invoice through here, and it's always showing up green through these, through these fields, we can then optimize this solution here to not only stop this document here, but we can automatically push that into SharePoint and on the way through the process, just like we did with the other 4 documents that aren't showing up in this verification process. So you can see it's grabbed the invoice number, invoice date, total amount, and it has a green light associated with all those, saying that everything's been accurately processed. So we hit OK, we move on to the next document. Now this is an example of a document that was going through the process, but then all of a sudden it hit a stop. There's a line through the purchase order number, so it can't really identify that number. So as we go through this invoice, we see everything green lighted, but for PO number, we see that yellow flag pop up, the caution. And basically it's saying, I don't know where to grab that PO number. So that's when the user can come in, we can select that field, and if it was a little bit more readable, we can wrap around that specific area and associate that to the PO number. But since there's a line through that, making it a little bit difficult to read, we can manually type this in. Just showing you that we can actually have some manual intervention on this as well. And then once we do that, it's going to say, oh, okay, we're looking good. Turn it to the green light. It says okay. We can move on to the next document. And this next document, this is that 2-page document that I mentioned earlier. Nothing's wrong with how the data was captured, but we wanted to stop this to show you that not only can it fill in everything automatically, but it can also grab multi-line items from multiple pages. So if we look at this document, we scroll down, we can see the bottom of this document, move on to page 2, and we can see that it continues on to page 2, and the total is actually found on the second page here. So it's smart enough and intelligent enough to know that total number or the total amount is actually found on the second page and automatically applies here. And then at the bottom of this page, you can see all the all the line item coding that's being stored from this document as well. It's going through and just grabbing all those lines and associating them down below. So at this point, we've kind of gone through, kind of looked at these documents, and again verified that everything looks good here, everything's populating properly, and we hit OK. Now it's going to say no more invoices in the queue. We're done. We've done the verification process, and things move on to the next phase. So going along with my PowerPoint here, we've gone through, we've done the verification process. Now it gets kicked back to the server processing, the automated processing, where it then can convert the documents if necessary, whether you want them to be searchable PDFs or TIFFs, or does that additional processing, and then eventually just releases that document to SharePoint along with all the appropriate metadata. And just like we talked about earlier, once it gets to SharePoint, that's when all those workflow actions happen. That's where the GL coding can be processed and so forth. Before I jump into the SharePoint aspect of things, as far as like the search and retrieval process, is there any questions about how I got to that point?